Now I guess this is what you would call like a hard surface IMM brush, but it doesn't have any welding. So let's do one that does weld. So I'm going to go out of edit mode, hit Control N. Let's go ahead and grab, I guess it doesn't really matter. Let's grab a Polymesh 3D here, drag it on the canvas, go into edit mode, go way down here to initialize, make a Q cube. And you're going to see it made it a little bit smaller than the ZBrush primitive. If you want to make it the same size, you can always go to Deformation Unify. Now this is all different polygroups, so you know that's going to mess up our tri-curve brush. So I'm going to hit Control W, make an all-one polygroup. We're going to scale this out here. I'm going to go into my Z-Modeler brush, BZM, hover over an edge, go to Bevel, Edge Loop Complete. We'll bevel this up. So now we've got two polygroups, top and middle. So I'm going to hold down Control Shift, isolate this top part, hit Control W, and there we go. We got a purple, a pink, and a blue. So I can capture this, and this is something I use all the time, as a kind of stylized hair brush. So what we can do is we can go to the top here. We're going to rotate this 45 degrees so I can snap my camera to the side here. We're going to hit B, create Insert Mesh, New. So that again, we have an Insert Mesh curve brush here, or just an Insert Mesh. We've got to go over here and turn on Curve. So now when we turn on Curve here, we're going to see we have a beginning, middle, and end. The middle is repeating, but it's not welded yet. So what we got to do is go down here. Let's go ahead and hit R to kind of clean this up a little bit. Under Modifiers, you're going to see we have TriParts turned on, which is good. We can turn on Weld Points, and now when I tap to update this, it'll go ahead and weld those points together. So now if I tap off, I can keep making more and more of these shapes, so we can smooth them out. Let's go ahead and turn off Snap for now. That'll kind of give me a little bit of a smoother result. And since this is hair, or maybe a tentacle, another thing we can do is we can do this curve fall off. So we can go in here to Intensity, and we can open this fall off menu, and we can drag this out, and you're going to see that with Intensity it's not doing much, but if you turn on Size, that's going to go thin to thick. Well, I kind of want the opposite. I want it to go thick to thin. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take this point here, I'm going to go, whoops, take this point, and I'm just going to drag this point up, and I'm going to take this point and drag it down. So now we're going to go thick to thin. Now you don't have to go thin to a point. You can go thin to, you know, not all the way to get a nice taper. And just like in the other videos here, you can add points in here and you kind of bend it out a little bit if you want to kind of inflate it down. You can pull off and then pull back in if you want a sharp transition. So you can kind of dictate how you want your curve to end up, depending on what the result you want to be. But I'm going to go ahead and just drag this off and then update my curve. So now we have kind of a stylized hair curve brush. We can go through here and we can make it however we'd like. And one thing I should mention is if you have the rubber band here, you can actually add stuff to a middle of it as opposed to just the end with like elastic on, or just waiting for that rubber band to show up. And another thing we can talk about is if we go down back here and down here to Modifiers, you're going to see we have a max bend angle. So if I go through here and I make a really tight angle here and I wrap this around, you're going to see I can wrap this pretty tightly, which is fine for like, I guess, a snake or hair. And if you make this down to 0, you're going to see if you wanted to do more like a railroad tracks, it's actually going to allow you to not wrap it quite as tightly. It's going to keep these things kind of pushing against each other. If you go up to 90, that's when you can just wrap it as tightly as you want. So the middle kind of does the best of both worlds, but if you ever wanted to do a tentacle or a snake or something and you needed to make like have it not break its back, or a railroad track where you don't want the curves as tight, you can just turn on that max bend angle and it'll keep things away from each other. Now just so that you're aware, let's grab a cylinder 3D here, drag it down our canvas, go into edit mode, let's go into polyframe, and I'm going to go down here to initialize. We're going to make this H divides, we're going to drop this down to 12. I'm just going to simplify this cylinder a little bit, and the V divides will just drop down just a little, somewhere around 6. So I'm going to go ahead and say make Polymesh 3D, and let's say we want to make this a TriPart curve brush. I'm going to scale that out a little bit just to make all of these sections a little bit more even. Hold down Control Shift, I'm going to grab this top part, Control W, Control Shift tab to bring everything back, Control Shift drag to grab this bottom part, Control W, so now I have 3 separate polygroups here. And if I want, I can hit W, I can Control drag out a copy of this. I can start scaling in the Y, and then hold down Alt, and that'll go ahead and make it thinner. So I'm going to have 2 copies of this brush right here. So if I capture from the side, I can go to B, create Insert Mesh, New. I'm going to grab my stroke options, put it over here on the side. We're going to go to Curve, turn on Curve Mode, go back down here to Brush Modifiers, go ahead and turn on Weld Points, drag this out. then you're going to see both of those tubes are going to behave and curve and weld just fine. So you can make compound, complex objects, and ZBrush will figure out what needs to be welded together.